Hi everyone, I'm Rincey and this is Rincey Reads. Today I am back to do a Friday Reads where I talk about the books that I have read over the past week or so, a week in this case since I just did an update last week. I have two books to talk about this week and I was slightly debating whether or not to do this Friday Reads because I was like, two books is not a lot for a single video, but also I'm kind of tired because people are trying to overthrow our government, but at the same time I want to talk about these two books because I did enjoy them, and two books is nothing to really be disappointed in over the course of a week. So here I am to talk about two books and I'll also talk about kind of like what I'm in the middle of and what I plan on reading a little bit soon. So yeah, let's jump into it. So the first book that I picked up in this year, actually no, I might have picked this up on the 31st. Anyways, the first book I finished in this year is 10 Minutes, 38 Seconds in This Strange World by Elif Shafak. This is a book that was like all the buzz when it came out. It was nominated for the Man Booker Prize. So I know a lot of people have already read this book, and I'm someone who really enjoys Elif Shafak for the most part. Some of her books have been misses for me. Overall, I really like her writing, so I was excited to pick this one up. And this is a book that basically came down to be a 3.5 star book. It's broken up into two parts, and the first part I was like, this is alright, 3 stars. And then the second and I think third part technically of this book were so much stronger, and I really wish that the second half of the book was really the majority of the book, but it's not. So at the beginning of the story you find out that there is this woman named Layla who is a prostitute who is also called Tequila Layla, and she has just been murdered. And so over the sort of 10 minutes 38 seconds left in her life, she basically goes through and recalls different periods of her life and different moments in her time and things like that. And so the first part of this book is about that sort of conceit playing out. Over these 10 minutes and 38 seconds, she might remember a very specific scent that brings her back to a very specific moment in her childhood. And then the rest of that chapter will be about sort of that time period or that event and things like that. And so you find out a lot about her past and how she got to this place in her life, which was interesting, but I found the conceit to be a little bit unnecessary. I think that this would have been a solid novel if you had just told me that there was this woman who eventually becomes murdered, and then you flash back in time and you see different aspects of her life that led to this point. I don't think the conceit of this 10 minute 38 seconds thing is really necessary, but I guess it makes a good hook in order to sell a book. Over the course of those chapters where you are getting flashbacks into Layla's life, you also find out about these 5 really important people in her life, as well as her love of her life, basically. And so those chapters also become sort of glimpses into those relationships, and it's those 5 people specifically who are the focus of the second half of the book. And so what happens is that they find out that Layla's been murdered, and they want to give her a proper burial. So since she is a prostitute who was just found murdered on the street, and her family has basically disowned her and refused to have anything to do with this whole situation, the police/hospital send her to this morgue, which is called the Cemetery for the Forgotten or something along those lines. And so her friends want to be able to claim ownership over her body and give her a proper funeral, because to her, she's not forgotten. Even though she is an outcast in society, she has made a major impact in their lives. And so that part of the story is super beautiful and really moving, and it's really nice to see kind of this gang of people working together. While Layla herself is a really interesting person and she leads this sort of beautiful and heartbreaking life, her friends are really what come to life, in my opinion. And it's their relationship and the way that they come together in this circumstance that was the most engaging part of this book for me. But I think that wasn't necessarily the point of this book. I think what Elif Shafak wanted to do was talk about these people who are on the margins of society and the way that the world around them basically fails them on a consistent basis. So yeah, overall, I'm glad that I read this book. I again think that the second half of the book is significantly stronger than the first half of the book, but I think that if you are someone who is reading the first half of the book and is being this is okay but not great, maybe keep going and try part 2, because again, I just think part 2 was so much stronger than part 1. All right, and the second book I have to talk about is The Midnight Bargain by C.L. Polk. This is C.L. Polk's new fantasy book that just came out towards the end of last year. This is a standalone fantasy book, and it's basically like a Regency fantasy. Like, the way it's pitched is like if Jane Austen's sort of world also had magic in it, which is a very accurate description in my opinion. If you aren't aware, C.L. Polk wrote the fantasy series Witchmark, or the Witchmark series, which is a trilogy. I read the first book in the series last year and I liked it. I haven't gotten on to the second and third book yet, but when I found out she was putting out a standalone fantasy as well as one that was like a Regency set fantasy, I was like, yeah, I will definitely pick that one up first. So in this story, you are following this character named Beatrice Claiborne, who is basically of age to get married in the world that this book takes place in, but she is also someone who practices magic in secret. So the way the world is set up here is that both men and women can technically practice magic, but when women get married, they are forced to put on this collar that basically suppresses their magic, and the husbands are like in control of that collar. And the reason why they have to wear this collar is because it's believed that if a woman is practicing magic when she becomes pregnant, then the baby will become harmed. And so because you technically never really know when you're pregnant to a certain extent in the world that Beatrice lives in, and specifically like her village, so to speak, basically married women wear the collar all the time. And so Beatrice doesn't want this life. Like, she wants to be able to practice magic, but she also recognizes the fact that like Beatrice is sort of like this hope for her family. Like, she needs to marry well in order to help her family financially, and she also has a younger sister, so if she doesn't marry well, then her sister is also going to be doomed and things like that. So she has this sort of conflict about what she's going to do. And so when the story begins, Beatrice is basically like getting fitted, or supposed to go and get fitted for her wedding gown, and it's like the beginning of like I was going to say like mating season, but that's basically what it is. But like this season when all of the available men and women in the area come together in order to like make matches. But she like heads off to this bookshop because she knows there's a grimoire. I don't know if that's actually how you pronounce it there. And so she's been finding these books by like sorceresses that are like written under pen names and things like that. And there's a code in there that could help her unlock her magic, and what she kind of wants is to fully unlock her magic and her capabilities and to help her father in the business. But when she goes to this first bookstore, she encounters this brother and sister, and the sister also basically wants the same thing, and so they're fighting over the same book, and they end up coming up with sort of this interesting deal that takes place over the course of this season. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. This book was just like really fun, delightful. The thing I like about C.L. Polk is that she just writes these really like kind of cozy, heartwarming fantasy books. I think that if you are like a high fantasy reader or something like that, someone who really enjoys like world building, you'll probably be disappointed by this because there isn't a lot of like explanation as to the mechanics of the magic or anything like that. But really what C.L. Polk is doing is like creating commentaries on society and is using things like magic in order to create basically like parallels or metaphors or anything along those lines about the way women are treated. And obviously like that's something I find super fascinating. Again, if you're someone who enjoys the pitch of like Jane Austen plus magic, then I think that this would 100% be up your alley. It's like a fun, charming book. It's really delightful. It is like a little bit too easy, I suppose, is the best way to say it. Everything just happens to work out really nicely in this book. The conflict don't feel that difficult to overcome. There's a little bit about Beatrice that's I find kind of annoying, and she seems like really naive in my opinion. Like her younger sister Harriet knows a lot more about like the season and what's expected of her and stuff like that. And considering the fact that like technically Beatrice's whole life has been leading up to this point, it's very surprising like how naive she is about the entire process, which I think is supposed to be sort of like a gateway for the reader to understand what's happening in this world, but it just feels like very unrealistic at times. But other than that, I really enjoyed this book. It's really fun and, like I said, easy to read and stuff like that, and I think that it's, you know, good comfort reading. So if you need something like that right now, which I would not be surprised if you do, this would not be a bad one to pick up. Alright, so that is everything that I have finished so far. I am currently in the middle of Children of the Land by Marcelo Hernandez Castillo. This is a memoir about his experience crossing the border into the United States from Mexico, and him eventually like getting his green card, and I think he eventually becomes a citizen potentially. But his father was also deported, and it's about like sort of his strained relationship with his father because he hasn't seen him in like a decade, and also, you know, the complicated nature of being an immigrant in the United States and all of that sorts of stuff. So this is a book I'm like slowly working my way through. I'm about a third through right now, and the way that it's structured, it's not like strong in terms of like plot. Castillo is also a poet, and so like the way that it's written and the construction and things like that, like it is very beautiful, but there isn't like a strong through line. So like every kind of couple of pages it comes to a break, and there isn't sort of like a plot to keep you going, so to speak. So I basically just read like a little bit at a time and am just like slowly working my way through it, which is fine. I feel like if I tried to force myself to read a lot at once, I would really be kind of missing the essence of the book by sort of like forcing myself to go through it really quickly. So even though it's not a very short book, I have a feeling it'll probably take me another week or so to actually get through the whole thing. And then a book I'm hoping to have finished by next week is A Knock at Midnight by Brittany K. Barnett. This is also another nonfiction book, and it is due back at the library this week, so that's why I'm going to prioritize this one over that one. This is another book that sort of looks at the prison system and justice system here in the United States and how it isn't just at all. I think it was Vanessa at Split Reads basically say, like, if you've read books like The New Jim Crow and Just Mercy, this is kind of like a good read-alike if you've read those books and enjoyed those books and want more books kind of along those lines. Brittany K. Barnett is a lawyer herself as well, and I think that like this book is going to be focusing on at least one, if not a couple of different people that she has represented and things like that. So I'm very excited to pick this one up. I've heard really, really good things about it. So that is everything I have for you all this week. Like I said, a pretty quick update, but let me know how you're doing. You know, I know it's not like great, but hopefully you're doing as well as you can be. Let me know if you've picked up any good books to start off the year. So yeah, that's all I have for now, and thanks for watching.